in August, we'll see all. Hopefully we'll see all you guys in August, but we'll do a tour of the campus. And you'll see all of the dorms for the most part, to some degree, whether it's, a complete cleaning, refreshing to absolute quasi 50 to 95% rehab, new flooring, new ceilings, new painting, new in certain one of the dorms, new furniture, new cabinetry. I mean, if you come by, there are dumpsters scattered all around the dorms, ripping out the cabinetry, putting in new cabinetry. So when the students come back and the new students come, I'm confident to tell you guys, and you'll see it for yourselves, hopefully in August, that the dorms are in tip-top shape, quasi brand new air conditioning, elevators, pressure washing, landscaping. It will hopefully be a sight to behold for all of you guys, and certainly will hopefully be something that our students and parents are super excited about, which will then lead to that slow elimination of the things that are causing our retention rates to suffer and constantly being in the bottom 3, if not last, in the entire SUS. So you'll see that, but the quick housing update is we believe the students are coming back to the best conditioned housing probably since they were built, and that we have rooms for those students, and that update's forthcoming. And as I said, we're calling them all specifically now, and we'll have those numbers. We had a BOG meeting, and it was good news, and I would say good news and good news. The second good news though comes with a qualifier. The good news is they recognize what's going on in New College. We've had the chancellor come down, and he's gone through the entire campus with staff and Trustee Karp. I think at some point Trustee Karp can chime in, but I think his quote was somewhere along the lines, he's never seen anything like it, and certainly nothing like it in the entire SUS system, the conditions of our facilities, which is great because he was going back and he's talking to the BOG, recognizing the need for additional resources, which should be fantastic. In addition to that, they also recognize that in some of those metrics, and 2 of them, but 4 of them actually are affected by our retention. Once we lose the retention number, we automatically lose the graduation number, because the graduation number is predicated upon entry enrolled students. So, and those metrics cost us somewhere in the ballpark, I'm going to round up $2 million. In addition to that, we have to go and go through all kinds of hoops and hurdles, which we should have to do that, because obviously we're not doing something right in the past, to get the original ultimate, give or take $2 million. What the BOG recognizes, and what was discussed at the last BOG meeting, was that the metrics, we are going to suffer from those metrics. But the concept of the metrics was, are you in our university system delivering a great product to the students? Do you have the necessary supports? Do you have good student life? Do you have good food? Do you have tutors and mentoring? What are you doing to keep those students on campus that you control? What they recognize with us is, even though those things in the past have not been done well at New College, what we're experiencing right now has nothing, principally, has less to do with that and more to do with the belief that there is some sort of ideological shift, or it's not the quote unquote the campus that a certain ideology might like. The BOG did not. First of all, the legislature, the governor, the board of governors has said they want us to become a wonderful, fantastic, best in the country center liberal arts school, and so that task is before all of you, which is why many of us are here, and for some of us for the first time. That is not anticipated in that metric. So there is a discussion, and right now we're working with BOG staff, we're working with the chancellor, our staff, the provost, our chief of staff, everybody is working on coming up with what might look like additional metrics that are altered for New College for a period of time, and maybe those get sunsetted. There's some sort of change in the original graduation and retention metrics for a sunsetted period, maybe 2 to 4 years, And in exchange, there's new metrics such as enrollment. You know, are we on a pace to have enrollment that means that we will be in 4 years a 1,200 plus school? Are we actually turning the foundation around and actually really raising money in the foundation comparable to the other 11 SUS systems? Those types of metrics, and Provost Thiessen is working on that, leading the charge. And hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll have, and we're working back from that August meeting. So just so you know, August will be the annual meeting. Before that, we're trying to have it for certain an academic affairs committee meeting, maybe some others. And then before that, you know, maybe a week or so before that, which puts us at the end of July, is we would have some of these documents to you guys in plenty of time for your review and input. And so that's where we're working backwards. But in that, the discussion of what the new metrics might look like. In addition to that, the BOG is basically, which is the good news for the catch. They notice us. They're excited about the direction that you guys are leading. They're excited about what New College has been historically and what it can be in the future. But they are tired of empty rhetoric. They've had it for over a decade. Nothing that has been promised has been delivered. And so they basically are saying, give us a business plan, which is not something that's required of the other SUSs. Understandably, it should be required of us. So we're putting together that business plan, which it would include an accountability plan, a strategic plan, a student success plan would all be wrapped into it. And that would be something that you guys would also, working backwards, look at the August full trustees meeting and potentially a committee meeting for approval. That asterisk of why it's good news is because I think, you know, if you listen to the rhetoric and we send it around to you guys, the full Board of Governors meeting, there is rhetoric, is how I would describe it, is you guys need to succeed or we are going to discuss other options. They never said what those options were, but I think there is definitely a long-term frustration with it exists in the legislature, it exists in the executive, and it certainly exists in the BOG, that New College must succeed or we will have other discussions. So I still think that's good news because it gives us, again, that sense of urgency, that sense of that, you know, rewrapping a Christmas present doesn't work. We've got to make significant changes. We've got to make those changes now. And we're doing them. Obviously, enrollment, more than any other reason, has been driven by the adding of extracurricular activities and the addition of money from the legislature. Those two things have absolutely increased our enrollment, and our enrollment is up both on first-time in college students and in transfers. We're beating both metrics, and we'll have the overall record by a long shot. And to the point that now we've become highly selective on what we're looking at in terms of students to maintain maintain the excellence that we would want for our college. Some other quick updates. You've probably read about the Car Museum. I do want to thank our general counsel for all his help. We have a handshake agreement. Hopefully by 5 o'clock today, we'll have a signed agreement. But we have a handshake agreement as of yesterday. That'll give us immediate office space, close to 4,000 square feet. It'll give us immediate additional gym space for the new student athletes, probably close to 4,000 square feet. And in addition, we give them an additional 4 months where they can remain open and find another location. It was very amicable, the discussions ultimately with the Car Museum, and that should be finalized today. But I just do want to thank our general counsel for all the immense help there and getting that negotiation to a positive fruition for the college. On the faculty, we've been doing a tremendous amount of work with the faculty. Trustee Spalding had a good call just last week, or not even this week, with the faculty members that have broken into groups who are looking at the core curriculum, looking at the technique, looking at the virtue or logos, and what that might look like. Hopefully we will have something. Provost Thiessen and I have communicated with some of the faculty members that we're now wanting to get some additional information that we'll get to you guys very quickly. Again, working backwards, that would be information that we'll have hopefully here for you guys for the end of the month for critique and review. Go to the academic affairs committee and then to the full trustees with this the timeline. So it's a little bit compressed, but as you know from what we, discussed earlier, this spring, what we really need for this fall, more than, again, it's a recommended core curriculum for this class in compliance with our accrediting standards, but the next class it would be mandatory. So we're doing it in phases. So the first year would be phase 1, year 1 as a recommendation requirement next year, and then we would add year 2, year 3, year 4. So the nice thing is if we get this part done a little bit, it's kind of easy because we have the whole canvas. It's not a narrow canvas in that context, but it's also a little bit rushed because we need it as a recommendation for this fall for the students. But then it'll give us an entire year to work on year 2 courses in year 3 and year 4 thereafter. So I think we're in a good pace, but that's the timeline. So hopefully we'll have something to you in the next 14 days for review and critique, and then that will go to the academic affairs committee and then to the full trustees. And then the other just tons of like projects, or if you come here or drive by, if you're local, not only are there dumpsters everywhere, there's landscape crews. Our college drive is going to go all the way through here, I think by the end of the summer. That's on pace. All of the housing is being implemented. We're still having some great negotiations and discussions with other food vendors that would be here available. All our security measures are underway, whether it's fencing, whether it's the brand new and newly minted security phones, the application that every student will have made available to them, making sure our technology, whether it's locks and cameras, are all up to speed and up to grade and improved. All of those things continue to be moving forward. Our recreational facilities, we're on pace as to the pictures that we showed you last board meeting. The pool should be completely up and done by end of August. It'll be a very, very different, significantly improved student life here on the campus come this August, and both the physical plan, and then hopefully with the additional faculty and with the new beginnings of our core curriculum, all of that will drastically improve and put us on that path where we will be a 1,200 plus liberal arts school, if not much more, especially with the continued support of the legislature and the governor and additional funding. We'll be able to drastically improve that physical plan and move more people over to the west side, build out sports facilities. Some things that we're working on of note is we partnered in the very loose sense, nothing official, with Architecture Sarasota. They've been great, and hopefully we'll have a proposal to you guys here in short order in the next week or two, where we're going to do some sort of architectural challenge for re-envisioning the Pay dormitories and what they could do with them structurally, whether it's additional a contest to see how they tie it into a sports to the sports, to retail, to shops, to all different ideas. We'll leave it up to the contest participants, but we'll hopefully have something for you guys on that in the weeks ahead. And that's generally the update, and appreciate all your support, and hopefully in August when we're all together, you guys. And then a couple of you, if I've talked to you, just to and you have requests, some of them that have not been filled. I've taken those down, and all of those requests that some of you guys have asked for certain documents, I'll make sure you get all of those by the beginning of next week.
President Corcoran, it's Chris Rufo. Can you talk a little bit in more detail about the faculty hiring? Give us an update for new faculty hiring, how that's going.
Yeah, we've going very quickly. And I want to again, Provost Leeson has been great. He's been working with the faculty. And so the process has been expedited. And what we have, which is unfortunate, Trustee Rufo, is a lot of the faculty that are leaving. I would say a majority of the faculty that have left have not given us any kind of consideration of notice, forethought, or anything. So that expedites our process. A lot of the people that we're immediately getting, because the hiring process is long gone, permanent hiring processes, we're getting visiting professors. But some of those folks that we're getting are excellent, and probably hopefully could turn into longer term faculty. All of those, hopefully we'll have a list for you, Trustee Rufo, of the new hire, who's gone, faculty that left and faculty that are coming in. probably in the next 10 days, I would say, Provost Eason, and with little bios on all of them, and get your input on all of those, and we keep in constant contact with them because it's, you know, it has taken a little bit longer, but hopefully that'll all be finalized. And those folks, as we keep in touch with them, we're saying, hey, you know, especially a lot of you guys have sent us some great names. And so a lot of those folks were saying, hey, hang tight, we're going through, we're trying to work as much as we can through the process, even though it's expedited with our faculty. And the faculty have been great. They've approved, gone through the resumes. They've gotten tons of folks themselves that are fantastic. So, but the hiring, I'm going to say in a ballpark, trustee, will probably be 30 people either are resigned, on leave, or retired. Ballpark, am I in the ballpark, Provost? And we'll probably backfill with 30 new heavily VAPs. But hopefully some of those VAPs will become long-term faculty.
Thank you, President Corcoran. I want to thank General Counsel and all of the new college staff and people. I know how hard you've been working on trying to get the place ready for the incoming class, on top of fixing facilities and all that stuff, plus getting materials to us so we as a board can act. I'd like to now turn the
Chair Jenks, can I add one thought that I did not add? Oh, Grace looks like has a question.
okay,
Trustee
go
King.
ahead, President Corcoran.
I say this tongue in cheek, but I think you guys all know it from a day-to-day basis. But at some point, it's probably possible that New College will close. That'll probably be somewhere in about 12 weeks or whatever Christy Fitzpatrick leave is. But once Christy's gone, I'm not sure any of us will be able to function. And if you guys interact with on a regular basis, everything that I just gave you in the update on a minute by minute, weekend by weekend, hour by hour, night by night, is tracked, followed, sought, everything by Christy Fitzpatrick. So I'd be less than honest with you guys if I did not tell you that I stay up now, because it's getting closer at night, thinking, what the heck are we going to do when Christy is gone?
Well, she should get at least a weekend off between the baby and coming back. Yeah, of course. Thank you, Ms. Fitzpatrick. You are the glue. Was there a question from Trustee Keenan? I saw your hand up in the
Yes.
air or comment.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have two quick things. And so the first one I wanted to stress and give a little bit of context to the rest of the board, because they only heard one comment about it in the public sections. They might not know the housing situation, but I want to stress the concern, because the situation this year is that, for reasons which I understand, you want to keep the athletes together, we are kicking out the upperclassmen from the upperclassmen dorms for the athletes, because that is the only dorm that can accommodate all of them. But what that leads to is now many of our upperclassmen are probably going to have to be dispersed amongst the letter dorms and then fill up the rest of the pays, which are studio apartments, and they will likely be doubled or tripled up in there. And so the concern that we have brought is that there is going to be this social divide amongst the students that wouldn't need to be there. And so the biggest concern the student government has at the moment, which I wanted to explain to all of you, is that there does not need to be that divide, and it does not need to be a political divide. But if a bunch of the first year baseball players and basketball players and all of that are getting the nicest and now newly renovated dorms, well, many upperclassmen are left tripled up in the pays, which will be cleaned but not renovated. There's going to be a lot of concern with that. And so my request was, to Chair Jenks, if it was possible, can we have the Student Academic and External Affairs Committee meet before school starts? I think what we talked about, Mr. Corcoran, earlier today was like the week before the August 10th meeting. And if possible, we get that housing plan that was requested earlier. Is that a reasonable time for both the chair and Mr. Corcoran?
I have had this conversation. Trustee Keenan's been very helpful on coming up with additional ideas on how to make sure that everyone on the campus feels like we're one strong unit. And that time frame works for us, and I think it's a good idea.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I believe that was gonna happen, that then the plan would come to us, so yes.
Perfect. And then the second question I have is some clarification because I was not able to watch the last Board of Governor meeting. So did our accountability plan, it was presented and then it was rejected, and they have now requested a business plan, a new accountability plan, and the student success plan. I don't really understand how that all came about or what the reason it was rejected was. Can you explain that?
To be very clear, it was rejected if you want to use that verb. I think what the Board of Governors was doing was giving us a lifeline. And so at the point of the presentation of the accountability plan, I told them that as much as I believe in the metrics, and I've been involved in the performance metrics from my legislative career to my time on the Board of Governors, that I thought that the metrics as applied to New College, given the situation we find ourselves in, it's not ever what was anticipated as the meaning behind why both metrics exist, all four metrics actually. And in addition to that, I was very honest with them that if we continue under those metrics, we will have a rough 5 years. That will continue, because if we have that anticipated loss in retention keep in mind the metrics are a year and a half to 2 years behind. So we're talking about last year's, this year's, and next year's. And then those years become extrapolated to your graduation rates. So I was just honest with them. I go, I'll just tell you that we will have, we can do all the student success plans you want. But until you measure us on the 24 entering class, when you have the stability, you don't have these ideological, whether correct or incorrect, perceptions that exist, and people aren't making decisions based on that, as opposed to what the metric exists for. We will find ourselves in that situation. The BOG very graciously, in fact, he's also on the BOG appointee to the New College search that was previous to this one, and he's also the BOG appointee on the search currently undergoing. Very familiar, probably has the most expertise on the Board of Governors, probably the longest serving member on the Board of Governors, and the most intimately knowledgeable of New College. Very graciously said and made a motion that we should pull our accountability plan because they approve all 12 in bulk. Pull our accountability plan out, approve the other 11, and then have us come back at the August Board of Governors meeting after working with the Board of Governors staff on looking at additional metrics and coming up with an overall long-term business plan. So it was very good news what happened to the Board of Governors. The asterisk is we are clearly, the expectations are put up, deliver, which I'm fine with. And I think all of you guys are fine with too, because we will deliver.
So the business plan is us presenting our proposed new metrics for the performance-based metrics. That's what it is.
No, it's two separate things. The metrics is separate. That's a discussion with the BOG about what do our metrics look like moving forward. Of course, once that gets worked out, and that'll go on over the next 2 months, give or take, a little less than 2 months. And we'll bring those to you guys for you guys to start looking at. But as I suggested in the conversation, you know, obviously retention and graduation, and the two related to retention, the two related to graduation, we would ask for them to be, I think the direction we would go is ask them to be temporarily suspended, or, you know, and then substituted with metrics that get New College to where the Board of Governors, the legislature, and the governor want us to be, and that is a thriving liberal arts school with 1,200 plus students, with a foundation that's raising more than it's spending, and all of, you know, so what we're working with under the leadership of Provost Thiessen is what do those metrics look like? What are legitimate metrics that we can go back
I saw that trustee Reed had her hand up.
Hi, thank you. I have a couple of questions, and I appreciate President Corcoran taking the time to go over a bunch of details with us. The first question I want to ask is just a little bit more clarification about what this handshake deal is with the car museum. I had heard that the car museum was moving out in 5 months. So what is this immediate access to space that we have with the car museum? Can you explain that? And what's going to be put into any space you're taking over from the car museum?
I can get all those details to you. I mean, but as I said earlier, we'd be getting about 4,000 square feet of just under of office space, and a 4,000, give or take 3,000 square feet for what we would use for additional gym space. Now, immediate. Again, we have a handshake agreement, but we're working on that being signed by the end of the day, and we would have access to that contingent on some of the specifics, but hopefully by July 10th.
And so then you'll be,
And then it goes through a process. So Itza, our facilities manager, we've been working with the county for the last, with the permits and what have you for the last 30 days. The reason we got to that point, because the parts that we're looking at are give us expedited permitting and expedited access to those facilities, because they have brand new air conditioning. They have all of the necessary things that the inspector requires. So our anticipation is on July 10th, those parts would be vacated. We would immediately go in and make whatever necessary renovations are necessary and have access to those by the beginning of the school year.
okay. Thank you. Then I want to come back to the point that Trustee Keenan raised about, first about housing, and more importantly about a meeting for the Academic Student and External Affairs Committee. That's a committee that hasn't met in several months. And I've been wondering when it's going to, because there are so many different parts of the programs you're trying to put in place that really fall under the purview of that committee. That includes the question of housing, that includes the question of the core curriculum, and that includes the master's programs that will be discussed later. And we know that this type of a board meeting is not really conducive to the type of nuts and bolts discussion that are really necessary for the Board of Trustees to responsibly fulfill our fiduciary responsibilities to the college. So I'm hoping that the Academic Affairs Committee is going to be meeting perhaps several times before our next BOT in order that we be able to address all the multiple things that need attention now. And we'll be talking later about the budget request and the master's programs, but I think that there's a lot of details that need actually to be discussed and aired before they're moved forward to the Board of Governors. Is this, so back to the question, I think Trustee Keenan asked if the Academic and Student and External Affairs Committee was going to meet. I would like that actually to be a commitment. And if I have to make a motion, so that we make a motion as a board that we expect that that committee is going to meet at least once, and if not twice, before the next Board of Trustees meeting, so that we can begin tackling these multiple issues, both in terms of student life, academics, and also our external relations with the community. I'd like to make that as a motion, please.
I would say, Trustee Reed, that your question was asked and answered. It was stated that we would be having those meetings. I walked you backwards from the August full trustee meeting to the committee meetings to the documents before the committee meetings. If you want to make that motion, you're more than entitled to as a trustee member. I would tell you that I think what is necessary for this board to do is to work together, to trust each other, and to move forward as amicably as possible, and not to require motions that are basically a check and balance of lack of trust. But that's your right.
I'm gonna second that motion respectfully, because there have been multiple things that we've requested that take much longer than they should have. So just to get it on record that we have that meeting for sure, because once school starts, it's going to be very difficult. So I second.
I
think
don't
it's
believe.
unnecessary. It's unnecessary, and I don't think it's a good precedent, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I
Good.
mean, we will get the, my understanding was that the Academic Affairs Committee was going to meet, yeah, trustee Bauerlein. Please.
I believe we met was it about 6 weeks ago?
No,
Well, there was a meeting, yeah, they had a meeting.
is there any record of that meeting on the Board of Trustees page? Because I don't believe I've seen that when I've looked on the page. And I'm supposed to be on that committee. So there's certainly been no discussion with me about any possible meeting times or about any of the business that's supposed to be coming before that committee.
Madam Chair, you have a motion and a second. It's ready for vote or any further discussion on the motion and then call the question.
Could the motion be repeated, please?
What, Vice Chair
The
Cristal,
motion was essentially that they would have the subcommittee meeting, the committee meeting.
trustee Cristaldi, what was your?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What is the motion? I understand that trustee Reed articulated the motion. I'm just not sure that I understand. It's to compel the chair of the committee to call a meeting. And I guess if that is the case, Mr. Galvin, a question for you is that, can we do that as a board?
You can do it. I think what you've heard here today is it would be a moot point given the commitments made, and traditionally the Board of Trustees chair establishes committees and schedules, and the committee chairs do as well. It's unorthodox, but the ability to make a motion to have a committee meeting is not prohibited. I mean, you could, in theory, call a meeting and then just adjourn. So it's just an unorthodox motion, but it's been made.
Who is it compelling? I mean, we're
Can I
compelling
clarify?
ourselves as a board, or are we trying, this is an attempt to compel the president of the college to do something?
Why don't we just,
Clarify?
excuse me, I'm the chair,
I believe,
going to cut through this, no.
sorry, I was just going to say, at the discretion of the chair, I think I might still have the floor here, but
Oh,
Madam Chair,
sorry.
I defer to you. That's okay. And I just in the follow-up is trustee Bauerlein is the chair of that committee. Is that correct? Or as a question, sorry, who is the chair of the committee? Yes.
Yes,
And
we did meet.
and trustee Bauerlein, are you as chair of the committee, is it your intention to meet sometime before the next meeting as has been requested?
This would be before the August 10th or 11th meeting.
I believe, if I understood correctly, that was the suggestion.
That's the next meeting that we have to have, and we're supposed to have that mostly in person.
I have.
Am I correct?
I have no plans to convene that committee before that meeting, but I am open to requests for that meeting and agenda items to place upon it.
Fine. Then let's do that and see if you can get the information from the requesting party so that we as the board know what the Academic Affairs Committee, has before it and what it needs to be looking at and accomplishing right now leading up to our next board meeting.
Madam Chair, I believe trustee Kessler had requested a meeting to be briefed and have discussions on the development of the core curriculum. And I wonder if that could be folded into the agenda for trustee Bauerlein's committee.
That would be
Just to be clear, Madam Chair, that's what, and trustee Ruiz, that's what I said earlier, is that working backwards from the August 10th meeting, there would be subcommittee meetings. Some were at those meetings, academic affairs, that, and as I said in my president's report, that would be a discussion of the core curriculum, among other things. And then backing out before that, which I said was the end of July, we would hopefully have documentation to get you guys' input and criticism and changes before we even went to the Academic Affairs Committee, so we could hopefully improve the product by that time, and then you guys can make whatever other changes at the committee level, and then it would come to the full board. All of that has been, that I have told you, it has been requested, and we will, with the chair's permission, move forward on all of that. And I think that, that is sufficient.
Thank you. So, Councilor Galvano, there's still a motion pending from trustee Reed.
There's a motion pending and a second that you can take a voice vote on it now, or it can be withdrawn based on the discussion that has ensued.
Well, I think it should be withdrawn, then you are going to have that meeting, trustee Reed. You will have that opportunity.
I think trustee Reed would have to withdraw the motion, or you'd have to vote on it.
If I can clarify the purpose of my motion, the purpose of my motion is not to force trustee Bauerlein to hold a committee meeting, but it's to ensure that this committee actually exercises its fiduciary responsibility to examine issues that are impacting academic affairs, student and external affairs. And that includes housing, that includes the core curriculum, that includes the master's programs that are going to be discussed in a little bit. All of those things seem to me to fall under the purview of the Academic Affairs Committee. And perhaps I'm naive, but I'm not sure why they haven't already been brought forward to the committee in before they're being brought to the whole Board of Trustees. I thought that the procedure was that before something came to the Board of Trustees, it would be run through a committee, which is the space where we can actually have open discussion and do the work necessary to ensure that when a proposal comes forward to the whole Board of Trustees, it's been vetted, edited, and is ready to go. And I'm afraid that that hasn't been happening at the moment. We received just yesterday a number of documents that actually really deserve to have a little bit of attention, both to form and to content. And I'd like to see that happening through the regular committee structure. So this is a question about how this board is going to operate.
Well, we're going to operate like we're supposed to through the committees. And so this authority has been delegated to the chair, to trustee Bauerlein, and I will leave it to him to work through our new college staff and through the committee to, yes, trustee Bauerlein, to get this set up.
Yeah, this seems to me like you're asking trustee Reed that the subcommittees do the work of the subcommittees and abide by the expectations that they already have. It seems totally unnecessary, performative, pettifogging, and unnecessary. I'm inclined to vote against it, unless you would be so kind as to withdraw.
I think I believe that this is a reasonable request. If other people want to vote against it, I respect that. But I'm not sure why you say that this is anything other than an appropriate request, that committees function as they're supposed to, which doesn't seem to be the way that things have been functioning. I understand that there are a lot of moving parts, and I understand that the administration is trying to move quickly in order to respond to requests from the BOG. And I just want to ensure that the BOT actually has a table where we can discuss these matters. I don't think it should just be a rubber stamp at the tail end.
Madam Chair, can I just interject that we've been very, very clear. I mean, we've been here, the group of us, probably 30 days prior to me, for somewhere between 120 and 150 days with a massive task before us. And we've been very clear. I've been very clear with all my meetings, whether it's faculty or students, that this year, for the opening of the 23 year, we're going to have to move very quickly in order to get New College in a position where we don't have to go up to the legislative session next year and worry about our existence. And so we have moved more quickly than we would have liked. Next year, I think you're going to see we will have a normal schedule next year. Both of we've been heavy on trustee meetings because of this. But next year we'll have a normalcy to our trustee meetings, a normalcy to our subcommittee meetings. But I also want to let you know from a rule standpoint, de facto, the full trustees is the can be considered the committee of the whole, which means you don't have to have a subcommittee when the full committee is a committee of the entire group. And so we've done heavily trustee meetings because of the expedited nature of some of the decisions that are being asked of us or that we're required to do. But going back to the original, and I don't think trustee Reed's going to withdraw her motion. I think the problem that I have with where we are sometimes in these meetings is they get bogged down in process questions that take away from the substance of us becoming a great #1 liberal arts college in the country. And I strongly suggest, I understood what trustee Keenan said and trustee Reed said. I said that I would work with the chairs. It is our intent to have the full trustee meeting the second week of August, work back a week to the committee meetings and work back to the documents for those meetings. I've assured you that that is what we intend to do, working with our chairs. But I would just say, Madam Chair, at this point, we have an agenda. We have 2 hours. I would call the vote.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Trustee Spalding.
Yeah, I think I to simplify this matter. I've heard several different versions of what exactly this motion is. At this point, I have no idea what we're voting on. So I move we table this motion based on a lack of clarity.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
We need a vote or are we table?
Madam Chair, you call a vote on it.
Okay, so
And all in favor of tabling the bill or
Aye.
the motion?
I.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Fine, motion carries.
Madam
Oh.
Chair,
Yes, trustee Ruth.
I want to thank trustee Byerline for his openness in accepting suggested agenda items. And I would like to suggest 3, if I may.
Can you
One
do
is,
that? Can you do that to him and not take up the time? of
well,
this meeting?
I'd like for everyone to hear what the items are. I think it would be reassuring to all concerned. That, of course, the core curriculum, which is already planned, the housing plan, which has been requested, and also an additional one, which is, given that 1/3 of our faculty are turning over, how we're going to cover the degrees that we are representing that we're going to offer. And that report would probably fall very heavily on the provost to provide that. Is that acceptable to you, trustee Byerline?
It is, yes, thank you. And one thing, I think that we're going to have multiple meetings because the core curriculum meeting, that's going to go 3 hours. And the other issues as well, the housing, and we'll need to have people come and speak to us about that. And trustee Reed mentioned the moving parts problem. And this gets to my sense of the role of the committee. With the core curriculum in evolving, it'll be hard for us to, well, maybe I should put this out there. Will that be difficult for us to have a meeting on a core curriculum that is still in an evolving condition? What I mean, my sense of is that the role of the committee would be to review a curriculum proposal, a layout, a plan that is fairly solid at this point, and we give our approval, we review. Am I incorrect about that?
I would add, Chair, that no, you're not incorrect about that at all, trustee Byerline, and that is why we're working. Just so you know, for the last 45 days, the faculty working with us have broken into 2 groups. They have a chair, they have 2 subgroups, they have Additionally, a new CYC chair. All of those groups have been meeting. All of them are beginning. We'll have first drafts that we'll be able to share with you that Provost Thiessen and I said earlier, we'll be able to get that information to you well in advance of that meeting. Well in advance for you guys to give us the input so that when we got to the committee meeting that we're discussing, it would be more of a review because you guys are well aware of where it is. You've given your input. And I think for your meeting, just to your point, Trustee Ruiz, that's academic affairs. We also have student affairs. Housing belongs in student affairs. That's a separate committee meeting and it wouldn't take up the 3 hours necessary for the curriculum. And as far as the faculty, we're not losing 30 faculty and not being able to bring about courses for our students. We're losing faculty and hiring 30. So there's no loss and there'll be no suffering of any coursework or AOCs whatsoever. It's just, it's a 30 that are leaving. And again, I will say it over and over, they're leaving on my words in ignominious manners that are not befitting of a college professor. But having said that, we will deal with it. Provost Thiessen's doing a fantastic job and we are backfilling with great faculty and the faculty that are here and standing and with us and fighting to become the #1 liberal arts college are reviewing those folks, interviewing those folks and doing a great job. So that part, I don't have there's no need for that to go to a committee meeting other than to give you an update, which I said earlier, to Trustee Rufo's point, we should have a list here of how many faculty left, how many retired, how many and who they were. In addition to that, who are the people that we're bringing on board? And we should have that for you guys in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it'd be a very good idea then to convene some meetings on all 3 issues, perhaps separate meetings on all 3. Have a presentation made by the proper officials and to conceive of this really as informational update. I think that would be a very good idea. And if you would like feedback from trustees, President Corcoran, at that time.
Agreed, Trustee Barland, that is 100% the intent to get accomplished in the next 5 weeks or less.
I will.
Go ahead.
And when I say 5 weeks, I'm taking us through the full trustee meeting in the second week of August. That's the 5 weeks before us.
I will be in touch with Christie about sending out possible times, and I actually don't see any reason to wait till the end of July. We can move pretty quickly, and if we give I think the idea of dividing the meetings might be easier to have 3 1-hour meetings than 1 3-hour meeting, but we'll work that out.
Thank you. So we'll get that on the schedule and that should get us moving forward. Thank you. We have other agenda items, and at this point, I am calling Trustee Spalding as chair of the search committee and a new College of Florida trustee to discuss the presidential search committee. And at this point, the approval of the compensation range that was put together by an outside consultant. So Trustee Spalding, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Jinks. We've had a meeting to look at the compensation, get a briefing on the compensation report. This compensation report was put together on the basis of the criteria that this board previously approved. And based on that, the Mercer analysis, which I believe you all have copies of, was briefed to the committee. The committee has then voted to forward a recommendation to this full board based on their recommendations of the market that we need to be in order to achieve our criteria. I say that because I just want to underscore this is really driven by what the criteria we put out there. There are 2 things about it in particular I want to make note of. One is that there are 2 sets of numbers, a base salary number and a total compensation number. The base salary number range, for instance, puts the current interim president about somewhere below the 50th percentile and we took the base salary range that Mercer recommended to the 25th up to the 75th percentile to give us a range for the type of person we think we need based on our criteria. And then there's a total compensation number as well, which is a larger number and widens that range. Something like 90% of colleges and universities use incentives. I think there was one of the objections to these numbers was to make that point. Dividing into a base salary and a broader compensation salary allows us to pursue a long-term incentive strategy with the new president, which I think will be very good in terms of achieving what we want to achieve. Which brings me to my second point about these numbers, which is, again, they're driven by the criteria we put out. We are in an unusual circumstance, a very complex situation, combining both a need to have somebody who would come in to reestablish, rebuild, refocus, whatever language you want to use, the college, given all the things we've just been talking about in terms of facility, hiring, you name it. But also in that criteria, as was mentioned earlier about the comments from the Board of Governors, we have very high aspirations and aspirations to be a top school, a top public liberal arts university. There currently really are no top public liberal arts universities. I think there was only one, St. Mary's, I think was discussed, that is in the top 100. Yet that's where we want to be. So our assessment, their assessment and our agreement was these ranges define the market where we will find the best candidates to be able to achieve these objectives. We already have about 60 applicants, which we are starting to look at, the committee. Our formal deadline is actually tomorrow, so there might be a few stragglers that come in at the last minute, as is usually the case. But we've got a very good market to be looking at, and we will start conducting some Zoom interviews. The committee are going to have another meeting to discuss our own assessments of those 60 to determine who should get a Zoom interview, which will be on the shade. We'll have a week of that in August. In July, coming up very quickly here, and then we will from that decide who gets a on-campus interview in August. So anyway, for now, I just put before you you have the report, and the proposed action is to take Mercer's recommendations to give us a range from the 25th to the 75th percentile for base and compensation. Compensation covers a lot of things. We're in a expensive housing market. But also you can do it based on compensating in terms of meeting our broader objectives of the growth of the school or other actions we would like to see happen. That gives us a range. That does not necessarily mean we hire at any particular point in that range. That's what can be negotiated. And my hope would be that we would negotiate well. But to be competitive in this market, given what we want to do, given the aspirations of this college, to restore this college to its greatness, this is I'm very confident the area where we need to be is a base salary with the option of adding and the necessary other aspects that to get the kind of person we need to turn this to achieve the kind of objectives we've laid out here. So, Madam Chair, and that's what I present to the board for approval.
Thank you, Trustee Spalding. Thank you very much for your work. At this point, do we have any questions of the presenter? Okay, I see 3 hands. Trustee Bauerlein, 4. Trustee Bauerlein, you're muted.
I think
Yeah.
Trustee Reed might have been first here, but,
The
okay.
screen I saw you.
Yeah, I would note that both Trustee Bauerlein, Trustee Kessler are on the search committee, and we're there for the briefing. So if they'd like to chime in, add anything, please do so.
Just a quick question, Matt. Why do we have to do a formal approval of the recommendation? Why can't we just let it sit and be a guy? I mean, Do we need some official vote authorizing this recommendation at all?
I'll let-
Yeah, we do based on Board of Governors requirements, and I can ask, I mean, council can confirm that further if you'd like to add something to that, but we are, you know, it's a requirement that we would then send on to them. So the board is approving it. We're proposing it to the board is approving it to go on to the Board of Governors.
Let's go up to the bog, yeah.
That's correct. And so all of this is done in accordance with the BOG regulations, even the criteria under which the compensation analyst did that report. And the search committee is tasked under those regulations with exactly what's occurring right now. And then it does specifically say the board approves that.
Did we answer your question, trustee Bauerlein? Okay.
And again, I emphasize this is exactly what it is. It's a range. It's not it's not a final agreement with any particular person or a particular pay for that matter. The presentation really laid out, as you have it there, if you've looked at it, looked at a number of different competitors and schools, largely based on what we aspire to be and what we want to grow to be, and what kind of person we would need to get to do that, and what kind of mix of thing would be necessary. And their report suggested that the compensation not only is the base a wide range, but also the type of other things that make up the rest of compensation, benefits, incentives, and otherwise, there's an extremely wide range that wouldn't have to be negotiated.
Thank you, trustee Spalding. I do see now beforehand, but since trustee Kessler is on the committee, I'm going to let him speak and then we'll go to the other three questioners. Trustee Kessler.
Oh, all right. Thank you. I just wanted to say that I think this is a very useful report and that helps us not only with the Board of Governors, but helps us ourselves to think about what we want from what kind of school this is, who our competitors are, and what it will take to move New College to the next level. Looking historically at it, I would say the previous president, President Oker, had a low package, and the numbers that we're looking at look high because we're used to a low base. And that may not be the best way to look at the situation in general, because we want to move up in the schools we compare ourselves with, and we need to get this college moving quickly, as has been emphasized before, in order to do that. So we're really, if you look at the list on page 23 of the Mercer report, we're comparing ourselves, essentially, we're beginning to compare ourselves with some of the top liberal arts colleges in the country, like Colby, like, sorry, that's not the right page. Hold on, let me get the right page.
I think it's at page 10 of the Mercer.
10, yeah, sorry. It was a list, but it was the wrong list.
Right.
Colby, Grinnell, Hillsdale, and one could add other famous schools in the same category. And if we begin to add them, those are much richer schools than we are. They can afford to pay more, and they can afford to pay students more, as it were, in financial aid to attract them. So we're going to be competing not only for a new president, but we're going to be competing, of course, in the future for students and faculty. And so it's going to cost more, but the expectation is that we are, we're seeking honor and excellence here, and that doesn't come cheap.
Thank you. I see three hands raised. These are for questions, and I don't know. Let's see, I guess trustee All right, so trustee Reed is raising her hand and Grace Keenan is pointing over to the other side of the screen. I don't know. Those two went up at the same exact time. So Ms. Keenan, are you yielding to Ms. Reed at the moment, trustee Reed? Okay, and then we'll go you and then to trustee Ruiz. Go ahead. This is question time, trustee Reed. So if you have a
Okay.
question. present it.
So I want to thank everybody who's on the committee for all their work. And you have a lot more work ahead if there are that many applicants coming in for this position. I have two sorts of concerns. Primarily, it's about the peer institutions that were chosen by Mercer. Actually, other than Colby and Grinnell, a number of the schools that are in the peer group really aren't our peers. And they include one school that's primarily just online and several that offer nursing as a primary degree. So they're not really in our liberal arts sort of realm. I do note, for example, I mean, High Point is a liberal arts program, but it also has graduate programs in pharmacy, accounting, law, and dentistry. And so their president is making over $2 million a year. And I know that that package got a little bit of controversy at High Point when he was hired, although people there tend to be quite happy with the work that he's doing. I would suggest, however, if you look at the SAT scores and things like that, the academic measures of High Point students, that's not actually an aspirational peer of ours. So I would suggest that the High Point salary really should be excluded from this range because it skews the numbers so greatly, and High Point really isn't a good parallel for us. If you look at the Florida Gulf Coast compensation package, they actually include Elon University, which really is an aspirational peer for New College, both in terms of the quality of the students that they draw, that they attract, and Elon's status as a really premier liberal arts educational institution. And their size, they're certainly bigger than we are, and they do have a more robust graduate program than we do, but their salary package is a little bit more in line. And if something like Elon were included in this comparison data, we would have a different sort of range. I'm also concerned because Florida is a public institution. And I think that our salary package needs really to be compared, as Mercer does in a part of its study, with other public institutions. And I want to emphasize that those of us who are here because we want to serve the public good. And so I think it would behoove us to make sure that what we offer, the president we recruit or retain, needs to be in line with other offerings across the Florida state system. And the range we were given by Mercer goes far above current compensation packages for the other SUS institutions that are much larger than we are.
Thank you, trustee Reed. Trustee
Finally,
Keenan?
I would say, like, if we're looking for peer institutions, the COPLAC list would be a very good place to start looking.
Question
Okay.
period. So you're in discussion. I'm trying to address questions and then we're gonna have a motion and then there'll be discussion. So if your hands are raised and your comments are more of a discussion nature than a question to the presenter, let's get a motion to approve.
So then my question is, why are there not more COPLAC or any of the COPLAC colleges, any of the other public liberal arts colleges across the country included in this peer group? Whether you want to include St. Mary's of Maryland or Geneseo up in the SUNY system, there are other good examples of public liberal arts colleges that would be our peers.
Thank you. Okay, do we have a motion to approve? Hang on, then we'll do discussion. Just do we have a motion to approve the compensation report?
The range.
The range. Is there somebody making that motion?
So move.
Thank you, trustee. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, now there's some grounds here for discussion. And I think trustee Reed's issue, I'm gonna tender it back to trustee Spalding so that you can explain the Mercer function and why it is that we outsource this to go to the experts to come back to us with the best data they can come back with to present to us. Can you address?
Well,
Trustee
I think
Reed?
the one question is, why isn't this a list of public universities and why are there even private schools on here? And I think the answer to that, and this actually came up in the committee meeting. I know, I think Trustee Kessler raised this question, or I can't remember. But the point, where will we need to go to find the kind of individual who will look at this for what we want? Which is, my emphasis on what we want to be, what our aspirations are, is really kind of goes beyond a lot of the public schools that are in the immediate system. And secondly, the situation which we find ourselves, which is, and it's been alluded to here, and it's been alluded to in every meeting we've had, for all intents and purposes, this school should be shut down, given all of its problems. We don't want to do that. We want to turn it around and revive it and save it. That's going to take somebody coming in who knows how to do that, and is going to have a lot more skills. The amount of things in our criteria that we want in our president, and the number of things we want them to focus on. This is not merely a normal situation. This is an important moment which we want to both save the college, but also jumpstart it and leap it into a tier where we all want it to be, and that's going to require something. So their assessment, and I agree with their assessment, is that we're going to have to be extremely competitive and likely draw in the kind of person at these private schools, which are really more, especially if you start looking at enrollment, revenue, and endowment numbers, where we really want to be. And I found that to be compelling. And again, it's a range that I think is one where we comfortably want to be.
Thank you. Okay, now we're on to discussion, and I guess Trustee Keenan would be next with the hand raised. So I assume that you had some discussion items, Trustee Keenan.
Thank you. And I did have some questions, but in terms of discussion, for the range and how everything was calculated, I want to ditto to Trustee Reed about all my concerns, especially that High Point was added, because that was an $800,000 outlier. So I'd be very interested to see where we'd end up without that. But one of my first questions was, what timeline do we need to make this decision? And is it possible to delay this and give Mercer our feedback on what we would like to see compared, for what universities we like to see compared in this study? That might be Trustee Spalding question.
Timeline in terms of the overall process, or timeline in terms of getting this to the BOG?
When we need to have this done, what's the ultimate deadline? This decision.
Which decision? To get this range to the BOG for their approval?
Yes.
I would, Council Galvano, do you know, is there a technical deadline for that? In terms of keeping the process moving, I'm working on an overall getting the whole process done into the Board of Governors by their August meeting.
The August 29th meeting, and as you recall, our BOG representative, Trustee Levine, was talking about the timing of this and trying to make sure that we work backwards from our new year starting. The regulation simply requires that the search committee engage a firm, get an analysis, have that analysis reviewed, and it goes to this board, and the board can approve it or not approve it. I guess Trustee Keenan, if it doesn't approve it, then they'll have to go back and look at it again.
Okay. And then, so my other comment was, in terms of the range, I mean, it looks pretty extreme to me when compared to the other presidents in terms of total compensation. And I just double checked on Dr. Oker's salary, and she was actually, there was 7 other presidents out of the 12 that were making less than her on the total compensation. So she was actually getting a pretty high salary in terms of things. So, and this is even higher than that. And so I have a lot of concerns about that. And I'll remind all of you about the widespread criticism this board got for not following or accurately accused of not following our fiduciary duty and paying our interim president too much. But I still have the concern if we commit to this range that we might not be able to follow through. As of last month, and somebody might have more updated numbers, but as of June, the foundation had said they had only provided $65,000 to pay for interim president's compensation. And so that would mean if the university had provided the 200,000, I think that they do, we've only covered about a quarter of what we owe Mr. Corcoran. And so I'm really concerned if we're now increasing that salary even more so for our future president. And so I would love to see that these numbers be redone by Mercer.
Thank you.
And just-
I'm sorry, yes, trustee Cristaldi.
Sorry, I was just gonna make sure I'm understanding myself correctly. All we're being asked to approve today is the authority to negotiate within a range between the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile. Obviously, who we choose would come back to this board and what we offer them by way of a salary within that range. And presumably we could take back to the board if we wanted to offer something above or below that range. We just have to go through a process to do that. Is that a fair characterization of what we're, and I guess that's the question for Mr. Spalding as chair.
Madam Chair, yes, that is a fair characterization. What you are doing today is establishing a range so that discussions can take place. Ultimately, any person you hire and the agreement you have with that person is going to be determined by this board of trustees.
And Mr. Galvano, I'm not making a motion on this, it's just a question. Would it give the board more flexibility to have the motion be that the range would be up to the 75th percentile as opposed to between the 25th and 75th, or is there reasons not to do it that way?
You can make that, you can modify the recommendation with that motion. Presently, the motion before you is to take the recommendation of the search committee, which had a full presentation of the Mercer group to approve.
Understood. I mean, it seems to me that the range is a very broad range, and it does give us quite a bit of flexibility. We certainly are going to have to debate after we even decide who to interview, who the people are, and then what the appropriate compensation for those people are based on the unique skill sets and talents and asks we're making of that specific individual. So just thinking out loud, it seems to me appropriate to support the motion, given that it's based on advice of a well-respected compensation consultant. I can't myself, I'll let the board know, do more second guessing of that. Some of you on the board have more experience with academic institutions across the nation than I do, but it seemed to me that they picked a cross section. They spent a lot of time surveying salaries of individuals, and the range itself is pretty broad and gives the board flexibility. So I for one, am supportive of the motion for those reasons.
Thank you, trustee
Right.
Cristaldi.
I'm sorry, Chairman, can I clarify one
And then we have two
item?
more for discussion, yes, and then we'll proceed. Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify again that, as has been pointed out by trustee Cristaldi, it's a range, but it's also a range divided intentionally into base salary and other compensation. And other compensation can be a wide range of things, including long range competitive contracts, which is say you can stretch this out and make this such that they have to compete for it and meet goals and things, right? There's a wide range here, because I think under the circumstances, we're going to have the ability to talk to a wide range of candidates who will do what we want to do. This is based on our criteria. So, but I just wanted to make that, underline that distinction again.
Thank you, trustee. All right, trustee Ruiz, you had a discussion point.
A couple of observations, because I've been involved with 2 prior searches. Two things that I've learned from that process is, one, it is very much harder to be a president of a public institution than a private one. Because you have the legislature, you have the board of governors, you have rules and regulations, you have the sunshine law. It is a much tougher job. So it doesn't hurt my feelings at all for us to be offering our next president recognition that this is a tough job and tougher, in my opinion, than private institutions. The second observation I want to make is that in past searches, the majority of our applicants, with very few exceptions, have been people ready to move into their next president job. They are not proven presidents. And the reason is that those private liberal arts presidents would have to take a 50% cut in pay in order to apply to the job. So we've been stuck in the position of hiring good people who usually work out in their first job as president. And that's been the case in our last 3 hirings. So I think that it's totally appropriate for us to benchmark ourselves to private liberal arts institutions, because that's where we want to compete. And if we stick to the public sector constraint, we are not going to have the kind of candidate pool that we would like. And I base that on past experience. We were lucky to get the good candidates that we did with our past presidents. And I think it's time to not rely on our luck. I think it's time to benchmark to the market that we want to compete in.
Thank you, trustee Ruiz. One more comment, trustee Bauerlein, and then we'll vote. You're muted. You go. You have to unmute.
Sorry, I've stepped away a couple of times. I have a parent in the hospital right now, just checking some things. But I too, like trustee Reed, thought that some of the choices on that peer list were odd. I don't think that that's a reason not to. I'm going to vote to approve this, but I expect the presidential search committee and then the trustees, when it comes time, that they will consider those concerns very closely about compensation, peer institutions, and so on. I mean, I think that's going to happen.
Great. Can we have a voice vote, please, on the motion that's been seconded? So we'll, Ms. Fitzpatrick, can you call the roll on this, please?
Madam Chair, I'd suggest a roll call on this particular vote.
Yeah, yes, that's what I meant, a roll call. So that's by name, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Is Christie still there?
Yep, I'm right here. Okay, trustee Anderson,
Yes.
trustee Bauerlein,
Yes.
trustee Jaco,
Yes.
trustee Hart,
Yes.
trustee Keenan,
No.
trustee Kessler,
Yes.
trustee Mackey,
Yes.
trustee Reed,
No.
trustee Rufo,
Yes.
trustee Ruiz,
Yes.
trustee Spalding,
Yes.
Chair Jinks,
Yes,
and vice chair Cristaldi.
Yes.
Motion
Thank you.
passes.
and I want to thank you, trustee Spalding, and your whole presidential search committee. I know it's a very difficult and job and a lot of work, so we totally appreciate your work here. So the motion is passed for the approval of the base salary and total compensation range as suggested through the Mercer report. Okay, is there somebody making noise with, okay. The last item on our list for today that needs to be dealt with is the legislative budget request, or the LBR. And we're going to ask, recognize Chris Kinsley, the Vice President, Finance and Administration, to provide an overview of the 2 legislative budget requests that are before you today. And he will explain what they are. So is Mr. Kinsley near the microphone?
Hopefully I am. Can you hear me okay?
I see you. You've got a deep voice, so you're a little low. Perhaps you could talk a little
Okay,
louder.
I'll pitch it a little higher.
That's
Better.
good. I can hear you better. Thank you.
Okay, try to talk higher. So, what we have before you is the 24-25 legislative budget request. And each year when we have these requests, we get some process questions. So before I get into the details of the request, I just want to touch very briefly, looking at the time on that. First, keep in mind that session will begin January 9th, 2024. So in order to get into the queue for the process to be considered for funding, that's why action has to be taken now, which is why the Board of Governors has given us a deadline, along with all the other schools, of getting these specific requests in by July 14, 2023. I think the board will recall I presented the fixed capital outlay, LBR, at the last meeting. That had an earlier deadline. So that covered the capital projects. Think about the multi-purpose center, land acquisition. That had an earlier deadline. Historically, this college had 2 special lines of the type we're asking for, recurring lines. But right now we have no special lines. All the other universities have special recurring lines. And so this just puts us in a posture to ask for the money, to have our president, to have our gov relations team even approach the legislature, going through the process and asking for the dollars. And I am very optimistic when you hear these proposals that we will get funding, but schools can ask for these dollars year after year after year and finally get dollars or finally not. And we have 2 gentlemen, of course, here who are very familiar with the legislative process, and I'm sure you probably like, oh, here they come again. They're asking again, not New College, but others. So this is just, it may seem out of order in times of sequence, but that's sort of the why of this. So there's 2 requests. The first is for something titled the New College Freedom Institute. This is a request of $2 million recurring. The purpose would be to hire faculty and staff. The staff would be, the scholars would work and teach on the New College campus. They would be faculty. They would teach classes to New College of Florida students. They would deliver public courses, hold live events such as symposia and debates. They would mentor and support our students and other leaders to promote freedom of speech. They provide professional development to New College of Florida faculty in this area. An interesting aspect is they would create professional development programs for other Florida universities and K-12 faculty. As we all know, this is a very hot area, an interesting area of research, and they'd recognize and award those who suffer from and persevere through censorship, that sought to limit freedom, and they look at other things. So in order to have a very robust institute, that's the goal of this. The college is putting forth a legislative budget request. And if approved by the board today, this would then go to the Board of Governors. Board of Governors would then include it in its, could consider including it in its legislative package. So that's the first item. And the second and last item, and I'll just cover this very briefly and see if there's questions. These are for 3 new master's programs: Marine Mammal Science, Masters of Environmental Economics and Policy, and Masters of Educational Leadership. These were covered in the accountability plan, which just came before the board recently. It will be going back before the Board of Governors, but that's different. This is the actual funding that would drive each of these programs. The specifics and the staff are all listed in the details. I have Mr. Nathan Allen, who's our strategic policy leader, and thank Nathan for the great work he put into this proposal. But at this point, I'd like to pause, Madam Chair, and see if there's any questions.
Thank you. And this is for, if we don't ask for it now, we have 0 chance of getting it in 24-25, correct?
Yes, effectively, yes. Technically, yes. You'd have to get all kinds of, you'd have to make special pleading to the legislature, which is not where we want to be. And you're bypassing the official process, which I know this board would want to do, which is you take these things to the Board of Governors.
Okay, so we have, this is question time of the presenter. The first hand I saw was trustee Spalding. So trustee Spalding.
Yeah, just same to follow up on your question in terms of clarification. As I understand it, we're voting to allow this to go before to see if we get funding. This is not final approval on the part of the board. And presumably we would see at some later date more details about the institute or the majors, whatever it might be. But right now, this is merely a process step. This is not a final approval. Am I correct about that?
That is exactly correct. It's not final approval of the programs, and it well could be. And I just will look, from experience with this, the legislature may say, well, love the idea of the Freedom Institute. What could you do for $1 million? What could you do for $3 million? What if it was this or that? So the
I'm sorry,
legislature may modify these proposals.
And then just to continue on that same question, is it the case that if this goes to the BOG and they approve, say, money for that, does that necessarily determine that this will occur? My understanding, though, it still have to come back to us, and we can still vote against it if we choose to, correct?
Defer to our expert general counsel and former Senate President, Mr. Galvano.
Nothing will confirm that it will occur until the actual budget is printed in Tallahassee. But what it does allow is for us to be within the established legislative budget request rules that exist in Tallahassee, and prevents us from coming back and having to try to get some amendment or other change to the funding process, which are very rare and highly unlikely. Ultimately, the programs and how you implement them will be at the discretion of this board.
Thank you.
Thank you. I next saw trustee Keenan had a question. Your hand's raised.
Yeah, so my question is kind of similar to trustee Spalding's. So these might not be definitively, we're voting on these for the final vote for if they happen, but is this voting on what our only options will be? So we're voting that there will be a Freedom Institute, hopefully, if the funding is approved, this is what we're asking. And then voting to have the option of only those 3 master's programs if we get funding. Is that correct?
Let me take the master's programs first. Board of Governors requires that our master's programs, since that's our highest level of degree, are treated as if they're doctoral programs. So those have to be approved by both the trustees and by the Board of Governors ultimately. That's separate and apart from the funding needed to operate the program. So that's just not unique to New College. As far as the Freedom Institute, in theory, the college could take from our base funding and create this institute, but that's a significant outlay to create that. And in the same manner, the trustees could determine to create other, not master's programs, but say, add new areas of concentration from our existing base. But again, those are significant financial commitments. So most universities, when they're looking to do something significant, they prioritize. They don't ask for, tens of things. They ask for a few things. They prioritize, and then the president takes it forward to this group, to their trustees, to make sure that there's alignment. Am I saying it correctly? So yes, you could look for other things. These are what are deemed, the priorities of the administration. If adopted by the trustees today, the priorities of the college.
And what other priorities were considered in the discussion process?
That is a good question. I'll speak for myself, and I'll try not to take too much time. So the state, for example, historically funded operations and maintenance, effectively utility and custodial costs. It hasn't provided funding for that in several years. It has unfunded increases to ensure that our pensions for our faculty and staff who take part in the pension program is more actuarial sound. That hasn't been funded by the legislature in some years. Those are real costs. We have to absorb them, but from does that sizzle when you take that to the legislature? Not really. So that's a bread and butter issue that was thought about, but we did not put it on the list. I know other schools thought about that as well. It's a real cost, but again, it doesn't have any real sizzle or appeal. And so that's the type, those type of things, other things were considered. I would add, we basically, Grace, the whole point is we're trying to grow the school and make the school excellent. So the concept was talking to faculty. We're the only SUS system that has one master's program. Nobody even comes close, not even Polytech that started years after us, decades after us. So the concept was, how do we grow new college? And are there programs out there where we could grow new college, immediately attract students and have it be unique to new college and successful in that process? And so in talking to the faculty, they're like, and you heard this from Trustee Reed, years ago or 2 years ago, we got approved for biology, nothing was ever done with it. And so in talking to those faculty and saying, we will do something with it. We won't just let it sit on a shelf. What can we do that grows the school, enhances our master's offerings? And so in meeting with those faculty, immediately our marine biology office came up and said, hey, we've had this proposal for years. We've pushed it for years. Nothing's ever happened with it. We think we can immediately grow, 15 to 20 students. It would be world renowned, et cetera. Boom, put it on the list. Other faculty, any ideas? Met with the economics faculty and said, hey, if we wanted something in this arena, what does it look like? Had a discussion with the economics faculty, tossed different things, healthcare economics, specific ones, but USF has a program, we'll probably partner with them. But it's not unique to New College. Environmental studies, it ties in with the other master's program that we're starting, with what New College has done historically. That could be a good one. We added environmental applied economics. And then the final one was the overwhelming need and historical, as said often by Trustee Spalding, the historical background of New College was quote unquote it to be a traditional classical liberal arts school. There's a huge classical movement nationwide. There's a dearth, not only in Florida, but countrywide, for having people that come out of a graduate program who are trained to be great leaders in that individual school and a great principal. And all of the data is showing that if you have great principals, that pushes down to great faculty, to great students, to great outcomes. And so what we said, also the data showed that what you really want in undergraduate degrees, if you want a biology teacher in high school, if you want a chemistry teacher, they're better off having a degree in chemistry. We already do that. In biology, we already do that. Having colleges of education are very, very secondary level to having a degree in that course that you would ultimately teach. So we didn't want to change and have some educational undergraduate program, but we do want to be a player in that graduate program. I think the graduate program gets launched. We could have a waiting list of students who want to go through that graduate program. And those students, which also helps our metrics, would probably be employed at $40,000 plus, a current metric, instantaneously upon graduation, because we would do it separate, distinct, and wonderful and great. And so that was how it came about. We were open to any suggestions, any ideas from anybody, but those are the ones that came forward. And we thought, hey, and even if some did, others did, we probably would have gotten to the point where, okay, 3 is probably better than asking for 10 because we're biting off more than we can chew. Let's go with these 3, but no others even came forward. But that again, just like we had the discussion last time, next year we'll go through another year. We'll talk about, assuming we move forward with these 3, to move forward and have these 3 available to us in 24. Tons of hurdles, tons more approvals have to happen. But if we want money for them, startup money, whatever, initial money, the deadline to apply is now. Otherwise, to former President Galvano, I use his title because of his expertise in the, let's say, process. Hoops and hurdles we would have to go through to get money is virtually or technically impossible. So that's really how it came about. Next year, hopefully we can have another discussion and say, hey,
We did a great job launching these 3. Is there another one or another 2 that we can possibly launch and add those co-curriculars that allow us to grow, just like our extracurriculars do, and not only grow, but make money for the institution?
Thank you. And finally, what faculty were consulted on the Freedom Institute?
I have to get you a list, basically on the Freedom Institute. In conversations with probably people around the nation more than anything. Trustee Keenan, it's a factor of being in the legislature and being in the Secretary of Education for most of the last 12 years. Senator Galvano for being the Senate President last couple of years, being a member of the Board of Governors for the last 4 or 5 years. There is a tremendous move nationwide to ensure that our college campuses are true marketplaces of ideas, where you can allow your mind to explore the great reaches of everything. And right now, there is a tremendous cancel culture that's existing in higher ed. There's a tremendous pushback against that cancel culture. And to have a Freedom Institute, the Board of Governors literally created a task force for free speech and civil discourse. And if there's none in it in the entire state of Florida, in the last 3 years alone, 3 or 4 SUS institutions got institutes with funding of at least $2 million. There's the Hamilton Center in University of Florida. There's the Adam Smith Center in FIU. There's the FOP Center at FSU. All of them heavily funded. None of them specialize in free speech and civil discourse. So not only do we want to have an institute and be a player of the 12 universities in that arena and get the funding that comes with it, which is almost annual funding. I wouldn't say recurring, but every year they get more additional funding. Maybe it could be recurring. And in addition to that, to go out there and hit up additional donor bases saying what we're doing are model free speech, whether it's in K-12 arenas, higher ed arenas, whatever it might be, in boardrooms. Allowing that and going out there and having it flourish nationwide could be an absolute tremendous benefit, and attracting additional experts, speakers, debates to come to New College and have it be that focal point of free speech for the country. Again, another job for the university, more funding for the university, more growth for the university, long-standing survivability for New College for decades.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask at this point, I see there's 2 more hands up. I'm going to move this into discussion. Can I please have a motion for the approval of the 2024-2025 legislative budget request, and then we'll address Trustee Kessler and Trustee Reed's hands, and then if there's anybody else. So can someone make that motion, please?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, now for discussion, I did see, let's see, I think Trustee Kessler's hand was up first. For this is, we're moving you into discussion, so we'll get to you, Trustee Reed, but Trustee Kessler, you had a
Right. Thank you. I'll be brief. Just as a suggestion, in the future, I would very much appreciate it if the president would bring these requests to the Board of Trustees as well as to the faculty for discussion in preliminary stages. I mean, it's too late now really to shape the proposals very much, it seems to me, because of the discipline, because of the lash of the Board of Governors schedule. But in future, I think I would appreciate at least having a chance to talk about the general ideas first before we institutionalize them or appeal for their institutionalization. I have 3 quick questions. One, is the language in these proposals fixed? I mean, the language is a little bit rough, I would say, in the especially in the Freedom Institute proposal. It could use some revision. I mean, but if it doesn't, if its only purpose is to get us in the queue, maybe we don't need to revise it, or maybe it doesn't matter because we'll be debating this later.
I'll take it with the permission of the chair. So the Board of Governors. Sorry, it will just put us in the queue if the Board of Governors does adopt this. it will just, it will be like a line item. It won't have all this narrative. They'll ask for a summary because we'll be in the queue with all the other 11 universities. So I would say submit, there's not a lot of benefit of like wordsmithing it or polishing it up further.
Right, yeah, no, but it's, there are some editorial questions, but then just the ideas themselves could use some shaping, I think. But maybe we'll have a chance to do that if the money comes down from heaven, as we pray. Second, the faculty positions. There are a lot of faculty positions collectively here that we're calling for. Are all these going to be eventually tenure track or tenured faculty positions? What are the ranks that we anticipate? And are some of them temporary? Some in the language, apparently there are some more permanent faculty and some more temporary faculty. Can you say anything about that mix?
Yeah, I would tell you, Dr. Kessler, Trustee Kessler, that this is basically what we put down on paper here. All of the changes, any edits, those discussions of what the faculty look like. This is for us to justify the amounts that we're asking for and to give a preliminary estimate of a budget. We're not locked into any of it, but the stronger our presentation, the more likely the BOG would approve it. And then that puts us in a posture to go to the legislature and fight for that. And in that time between now and January, when the session starts, specifics, changes to language, changes to focus, changes to how the faculty are worked or not worked, all of that would be available to us to move forward and make those changes and improve the product.
Okay, good.
We would welcome your thoughts because you're right. Maybe, this is a nationwide topic. There may be a need for somebody who wants to be permanently here at the college. There may be a faculty member of prominence, who wants to basically be like a visitor or a special scholar type of thing. So,
Right.
so your comments are very much welcome.
Trustee Crystal, Vice Chair
Thank you.
Crystal, up, and I wanted to make sure he.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I wanted to just say, Trustee Kessler, I think that the difference is that this is a funding proposal. It's not the charter for the Freedom Institute or any of the activities. So there will be a lot of work to be done if the legislature approves funding. And I would presume that much of that would be done in conjunction with the faculty and would come back to this board for approval. So there's a very significant difference, and our president and our council can correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is very significant difference between the funding proposal and then once the funding gets approved, the actual charter and implementation documents associated with the implementation of these programs.
That's exactly correct. I mean, essentially what we're doing is that the policy behind it was that the SUS BOG wanted to have more authority over what the requests were coming in. So one university didn't find itself at a disadvantage because, to be frank, it didn't have a good lobbyist as another. So all we're doing right now is saying, here's our idea. Chancellor, look at this idea. You think it's appropriate, put it on your list. So the ask is coming from you as leadership of the SUS and not us individually hat in hand.
Yes, okay, my final question, very brief, is this doesn't, funding from the state doesn't preclude us from seeking funding from other sources for any of these programs. Is that correct? Private sources or other public sources, if there might be some?
No, not only does it not preclude us from getting other funding sources, it doesn't preclude us from moving forward on all 4 items.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee Reed, you had your hand up for discussion.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I have two sorts of concerns. One, I want to echo things that Trustee Kessler was raising about the writing of the proposal for the Freedom Institute. I will strongly suggest that first paragraph just be struck. And if you're not going to strike that first paragraph, which I think is likely to, I don't think it puts the best foot forward. Please note that the title of Emma Lazarus's poem is The New Colossus, not Colossus. And the Statue of Liberty shouldn't be part of the reference. It's Emma Lazarus's words. But I would just suggest getting rid of that first paragraph. There's a lot of other edits that need to be done. In particular, on the second page of that, you quote an older version of the accountability plan, not the one that was edited by Provost Thiessen and approved at our meeting a couple of weeks ago. Okay. So I hope that that language can get cleared up. I understand what you're saying about this not being a formal proposal, but I think it's important that we put our best foot forward, right? If this is going to be a hallmark for New College, let's make it solid and not something that any New College faculty member would say needs more editing. Then I want to come to the question of the master's programs. So when we met a couple of weeks ago, you proposed 3 master's programs, the one in marine mammal science and the one in educational leadership and a different one in economics. Given various things, I think the proposal for environmental economics and policy makes some sense, although to go back to a question or a comment that was made earlier, I think the fact that we are going to be understaffed both in economics and policy for the next couple of years is going to raise some problems with that. We've lost the policy people in political science. We've lost the policy people in economics at the moment. But my real concern is about the educational leadership program. A couple of weeks ago, Trustee Spalding made the point, clarifying that we're not being asked to approve these programs. And we were given assurances that when we approved the accountability plan, what was going to happen was just a preliminary discussion of these with the faculty and on campus. And now 2 weeks later, you've come back with a budget request, which is a little bit of a surprise. So personally, I would like to see the educational leadership masters taken out of this proposal. I don't have such issues with the one with marine mammals because there is clear faculty buy-in. I don't believe that there is strong faculty buy-in for environmental economics, although I think that could be built and that seems like a reasonable proposal. But I think that it is far too early to be putting forward a proposal for educational leadership when this has not at all been vetted through any sort of faculty committee, much less the Board of Trustees.
It's a request for money.
And 3 weeks ago, we were told that this would not be happening.
If this,
3 weeks ago, we were told that there would be discussions before any proposal came forward. At some point, we'll get this coming up through the appropriate committee and it will be discussed and vetted. And that was what was said by Trustee Spalding and confirmed by Provost Thiessen. So I'm concerned about why this is coming up again so quickly when there hasn't been any discussion of this.
But I guess just to further that question, nothing here necessarily contradicts what was just said. That is to say, my understanding is that this is a request for funds, but at some point this would have to come, a broader design, including the particulars, would have to come up through a process that eventually comes up to the board again.
So I guess I would make a motion that this educational leadership be stripped from this proposal, and that a proposal go forward for the Freedom Institute and for the 2 other master's programs in marine mammal science and in economics of environmental science, environmental studies,
Yes.
economics and policy.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, you have a motion pending. We're in discussion.
Right, we're in a motion pending with discussion. So actually, given our time constraints and the discussion and the nature of what this is, Mr. Kinsley, the request for the edits to this, at least that first paragraph of the request, is that something you can do?
I will work with Mr. Allen and make sure the citation is done, is exactly correct.
Fine, so subject.
For what it's worth, too, I'm with Professor and Trustee Reed. the first paragraph's a little hyperbolic. It's very excited, but might be stronger to just strike it.
Yeah.
I
so-
agree with that too. I just strike that first paragraph.
Fine, so subject to striking the first paragraph, do I need another motion?
No, I think it's clear. You're
Fine, so
making that
We
it's
can,
direct.
Can we call the vote on this? It's already 4:19, and I think we've exhausted the discussion about the request for money, so.
Madam Chair,
Trustee
let
Easter?
me just ask before we vote. Did the person who made the motion amend the motion to strike any text or something like that, or were those just suggestions and discussion? Maybe it's a question for Mr. Galvano or the person who made the motion.
If the person who made the motion would like to amend it to be abundantly clear that the edits discussed will be made, that's appropriate. Also, it's common practice, though, that if there are edits and typos and other clerical errors that need to be corrected, that the chair can direct the staff to do so before submittal. So it's the pleasure of the board, but I think you'd be good either way.
So I'm
And
gonna
just to
direct,
be clear, yeah, I'm not suggesting that that has to happen. I just want to understand what we're voting on here.
so we're voting on the proposed 2024-2025 legislative budget request with the first paragraph of the Form 1 for the New College Freedom Institute, that first paragraph to be removed. Is that correct? Okay,
That and looking at the citations, to make sure they are correct.
right.
Yeah,
but okay. So can we vote now?
I thought that given that caveat, we were voting to approve.
Yes, we are.
Proposal
So
request.
a roll call vote. So Ms. Fitzpatrick, please call the roll on the vote.
Trustee Anderson,
Yes.
trustee Bauerlein,
He's muted.
Yes.
trustee Jaco,
Can I ask for clarification on what we're voting on? I'm not quite sure if we're voting on trustee Reed's change or are we voting on the full request? Can someone state?
We're voting on the budget, on the request for the approval of the 24-25 legislative budget request with the editor of the writer of this report to remove the first paragraph and to double check any citations that may not be correct.
So I thought based on our general counsel's advice that you, Madam Chair, could just direct that. So didn't that happen?
Yes,
Okay, so can that not be part of this vote so we can clarify what this vote's about?
I thought it was clear.
So if you've directed the edits, then the edits should not be part of this vote any longer. And that'd probably be a good practice, is that we don't vote on editing, but we have you direct the editing.
Fine, I've directed the editing. And subject to that editing to have this legislative budget request for 24-25 approved.
So just for clarification again, are we voting on the budget request as it was originally presented? Or are we voting on it with some amendment from trustee Reed?
There's no amendment from trustee Reed.
Okay,
We're just-
got it. Okay, sorry.
So we still need your vote.
Yeah, I vote aye.
Okay.
thank you. Trustee Carp,
Yes.
trustee Keenan,
No,
trustee Kessler,
Yes.
trustee Mackey.
Muted. It looked like a yes.
I can read lips, fine. Trustee Reed.
No,
Okay, trustee Rufo,
I'm a yes.
trustee Ruiz.
Oh, she had to go.
Okay, trustee Spalding,
Yeah.
Yes.
Chair Jeans,
Yes,
Vice Chair Cristaldi.
Yes.
okay,
Motion
fine. So we're going to just clean up that first paragraph and just check for grammatical corrections or errors. that being said, we have now completed the items that need to be voted on. I have on my agenda a discussion for new business, which we can't vote on anything, but is there any new business that anybody wishes to raise at this point? Okay. Seeing none, can I please have a motion to adjourn?
So
moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of adjourning? Aye.
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 Okay, thank you, everybody. It's a lot of work.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. All right. See everyone soon.
Thank you, everybody.